7. Worst prisons in U.S. History. America's most brutal and notorious lockups. Throughout America's history, prisons have stood as symbols of punishment, control, and sometimes pure human cruelty. Behind the high walls and steel bars, the nation's worst criminals, and in some cases, its most desperate men faced a system designed not just to confine, but to break them. Today, we'll open the gates to the 7 worst prisons in U.S. history. Institutions where brutality, isolation, and despair define daily life. From Alcatraz to ADX Florence, these prisons weren't just correctional facilities, they were monuments of suffering, shaping the dark legacy of American incarceration. This is 7 worst prisons in U.S. history. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. The Rock, 1934. 1963. Sitting in the icy waters of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz was built to be inescapable. From 1934 to 1963, it housed America's most dangerous criminals, Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman of Alcatraz. But this was no ordinary prison. It was designed as the final stop for inmates who couldn't be controlled elsewhere. Guards enforced absolute discipline. Silence was expected, even a whisper could mean days in solitary confinement. The cells were small, cold and damp, the food barely edible, the isolation unbearable. Despite its reputation for security, Alcatraz was never foolproof. In June 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, executed the prison's most daring escape. Using makeshift tools and a raft of raincoats, they disappeared into the fog. Their bodies were never found. The U.S. Marshal's case remains open, a haunting reminder that even the Rock couldn't contain every man forever. Number 2. Attica Correctional Facility. The Powder Keg. Opened 1931. If Alcatraz was built to contain, Attica was built to control. And when control failed, chaos erupted. Located in upstate New York, Attica became infamous for the 1971 prison riot, one of the bloodiest uprisings in American history. For years, prisoners had complained of overcrowding, racial discrimination, and abuse from guards. Conditions were brutal: cells crammed with inmates, poor medical care, and almost no contact with the outside world. When the riot broke out, more than 1,200 inmates seized control of much of the prison, taking 42 staff members hostage. For 4 tense days, negotiations dragged on as media from around the world watched. Then, on September 13th, the state sent in troopers. In a storm of tear gas and gunfire, 43 people were killed, including both inmates and hostages. The massacre shocked the nation. It exposed the violent underbelly of America's prison system and sparked demands for reform. But for many who survived, the scars of Attica never healed. Number 3. Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola. Down in the heart of Louisiana lies Angola Prison, a place many call the farm, but this isn't a peaceful countryside retreat. Angola sits on 18,000 acres of former slave plantation land, and for decades, the parallels were impossible to ignore. Once slavery was abolished, Angola became a prison, but the work never stopped. Inmates, mostly African American, were forced into chain gangs, working fields under the blazing sun, watched by guards on horseback with rifles. The brutality was systemic. Inmates faced violence, abuse, and death at alarming rates. In the 1950 seconds and 60 seconds, Angola was nicknamed the bloodiest prison in America. Even today, while conditions have improved, Angola remains controversial, housing over 5,000 inmates, many serving life sentences without parole. It's a place where time stands still, a grim reminder of how America's prison system is intertwined with its history of racial oppression. Number 4. San Quentin State Prison, the House of Pain, opened 1852. Few prisons have the dark legacy of San Quentin. Located just north of San Francisco, it's California's oldest and most notorious correctional institution. Opened in 1852, San Quentin was meant to symbolize law and order in a new state. Instead, it became a house of horror. Executions, riots, and gang violence plagued the prison for over a century. Inside, inmates faced overcrowding and despair. The death row at San Quentin became infamous. Over 700 men have awaited execution here. The gas chamber, installed in the 1,930 seconds, became a chilling symbol of the state's justice system. Yet San Quentin also became a paradox, home to both death and redemption. In the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds, the prison hosted educational programs, journalism projects, and even music initiatives that gave inmates a voice. Still, for many, San Quentin remains the house of pain, where the line between punishment and cruelty has always been razor thin. Number 5. Rikers Island, the Island of Misery, opened 1932. In the shadow of New York City's skyline sits Rikers Island, a name synonymous with corruption, violence, and neglect. Since 1932, Rikers has served as a massive jail complex, not a prison for the convicted, but a holding facility for the accused awaiting trial. But what happens inside has often been worse than any sentence. Reports of beatings, stabbings, and guard abuse are common. Overcrowding has reached crisis levels. And despite being only a temporary stop, thousands of inmates spend years trapped there, waiting for their cases to move. Perhaps the most haunting story is that of Khalif Browder, a 16-year-old accused of stealing a backpack. He spent 3 years at Rikers, 2 of them in solitary confinement without ever being convicted. The psychological toll led him to take his own life after his release. His story drew national outrage, turning Rikers into a symbol of a broken justice system. Today, efforts are underway to shut the complex down, but its legacy of suffering will linger for generations. Number 6. Sing Sing Prison, the Big House on the Hudson, opened 1826. Built along the Hudson River in 1826. Sing Sing was one of America's earliest attempts at large-scale incarceration, and quickly became infamous for its methods. The phrase, "sent up the river," was born here, a reference to prisoners being sent from New York City up the Hudson to Sing Sing. Executions were public spectacles. Between 1891 and 1963, 614 people were executed in Sing Sing's electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky. The institution's philosophy was built on discipline through fear, total silence, isolation, and hard labor. The prison's name itself comes from a Native American phrase meaning stone upon stone, an eerie reflection of the cold walls that kept men caged within. Though reforms in the late 20th century modernized the facility, Sing Sing remains a potent symbol of old-world punishment, where cruelty was not the exception, but the rule. Number 7. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, opened 1994. In the heart of Colorado, surrounded by mountains and desert, stands ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States. It's often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. Opened in 1994, ADX was designed to house the nation's most dangerous and high-profile inmates, terrorists, cartel leaders, and serial killers. Here, solitary confinement is total. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day alone in small concrete cells, with meals delivered through slots in steel doors. There is no human contact, no rehabilitation, only isolation. Among its residents have been Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, Zacharias Moussaoui, the 9/11 conspirator, and Richard Reed, the shoe bomber. Critics call ADX a form of psychological torture. The UN has even condemned its use of long-term, solitary confinement as inhumane. But for the federal government, ADX represents ultimate control, the end of the line for those deemed too dangerous for anywhere else. Conclusion: America's legacy of punishment, from the dark cells of Alcatraz to the modern isolation of ADX Florence, America's prisons reveal a chilling truth: that the line between justice and cruelty has often been blurred. Each of these institutions was born from fear, fear of crime, fear of rebellion, fear of chaos, but behind every wall and every locked door are human stories of suffering, resilience, and survival. Prisons were meant to correct, yet in many cases they became places where humanity itself was lost. As reforms continue and new facilities rise, the ghosts of these 7 prisons remain reminders that true justice can't exist without compassion. This has been 7 Worst Prisons in U.S. History. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history, crime, and the human stories behind them.